Alright, so today we're going to solve problems for thermochemistry. And this is one of the slides that was on your PowerPoint that you had to take notes over. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is that you can manipulate this formula to find either mass, specific heat, or change in temperature. Okay? Another thing I want you to notice is that when you manipulate them, all of them have Q on the top. So don't think of it as different formulas. Think of it as one main formula, but all you're doing really is you're just manipulating it. And Q is always going to be on top. Whatever it is that you're not looking for example, here we're looking for M. We know Q's on top. Whatever you're not looking for is going to be on the bottom. So in this case, Cp, which is specific heat, and delta T, which is change in temperature. Let's go ahead and take a look at the very first problem. And this problem, like I said, is a one from your PowerPoint and the notes that you took. So you should have it in your notes. It says a 45-gram sample of iron is heated from 25 degrees Celsius to 50 degrees Celsius. How much energy is required? And then they tell you Cp, which is specific heat for iron, is 0.449 joules over grams times degrees Celsius. Okay, this is where this part of the notes comes in. So what you want to do for all these problems is you want to start labeling them. Okay, so it says, first of all, how much energy is required. So remember that if you look at what everything stands for, Q stands for energy. So they're asking you for what's Q. Okay, so if you're looking for what's Q, that's our formula. Okay, so then it goes on to say that you have a 45-gram sample. Okay, so which variable deals with grams? It would be M for mass. Okay, so we know that the 45 grams is going to be mass. And then it goes on to say that it's heated from 25 degrees Celsius to 50 degrees Celsius. We know temperatures are expressed in Celsius, so we know that's going to be our temperature. Okay, this little triangle here, it means change. So that means like you're going to have a final temperature and an initial temperature. And in this case, it's telling you, well, it was at first 25 degrees Celsius and then it changed to 50. So 50 degrees Celsius would be our final temperature and 25 is our initial. So for change in temperature, it's always going to be final minus initial. In other words, 50 minus 25. Okay, it goes on to say how much energy Q is required, which we already established that that's what we're looking for. And then it tells us that Cp, or specific heat of iron, is 0.449. Okay, so once we note that, we can now take a look at how to set up the problem. Okay, there's our formula. And we start with, all right, we know mass is 45 grams. That's one of our givens. 0.449 is again one of our givens. And then like I said before, delta T, that's final temperature minus initial. And like I said before, you're going to subtract it. So 50 degrees Celsius minus 25. So that's going to give us 25 degrees Celsius. Okay, now that we know what our givens are, all we're going to do is we're going to plug it into the formula. That one goes there. Cp goes here, and then delta T, which is 25, goes here. So it looks like this. Okay, and I know that all of you are going to start looking at these letters behind them and think, how am I gonna put that in the calculator? You don't. Those are units, and the units you solve separately. Okay, you're really going to deal with the numbers first. So on your calculator, you're going to multiply 45 times 0.449 times 25. Okay, once you do that, it's going to give you a total of 505.13. Now, you're going to notice that I put joules, and the question is why? Okay, so remember I said that these could be dealt with separately. They should not be placed into the calculator. Okay, you've got your grams. you've got your joules over grams times degrees Celsius and your degrees Celsius. So what's going to happen is that you're going to cancel those like units. So grams cancels grams, Celsius cancels Celsius, and you're left with joules. So now you know that the unit is going to be joules. If all else fails, you go back, you look at Q, and you know Q is going to be expressed in joules. So either you're going to manipulate how the units are, or you're going to go ahead and look at your notes and know that Q is going to stand for units of joules. So now we're going to take a look at the assignment that was given to you on Friday. All right, so the best thing for you to do is first of all find out what is it they're asking you to calculate or find. So for number 1, I highlighted that it's asking calculate the specific heat. So that means that I'm going to focus on using the formula that solves for specific heat. Therefore, I'm going to use this formula. Okay, on the second one, I highlighted that they're asking me how many joules of heat. So if they're asking me how many joules of heat, I look back at my notes. They're asking me how many joules of heat, so therefore they're asking me what's Q. So therefore I'm going to use a formula where I multiply mass, specific heat, and change in temperature. As I keep going, I'm going to go ahead and highlight everything I see on my assignment. It'll just make it a lot easier, and you're going to find out what formula you're using for each and every single problem that you're doing. Okay, aside from that, you're also going to take a look at the following things. What are your givens? So every number that I see on each problem, I'm going to go ahead and underline. Okay, so I've got this number that says 15.75 grams. And a lot of you are going to say, well, I don't know what that stands for. So again, that's where you take a look at your notes. And 15.75, take a look and pay attention to the fact that it says grams. So therefore, I look at which variable has grams, that's mass. So what I would do is I go to my assignment and I'm going to write down that this number is going to be mass. Okay, the next number says 1086.75 joules. So my unit is joules. I go back to my notes. Okay, what's joules? Joules is going to be Q. So I know that this number stands for Q. Okay, then they give me that the temperature changes from 25 degrees Celsius to 175 Celsius. Okay, and again, that's going to tell me that something in Celsius is going to be delta T. So I know that when I subtract these two, that's going to give me delta T. So now I know that I'm looking for CP, but I'm given M, Q, and delta T. Okay, so there's the formula as we said before, because they're asking us for specific heat capacity. There it is. And remember that we calculated, or we figured out what everything stood for. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite it again. So M is 15.75 grams, Q 1086.75 joules, and then delta T. Our final temperature was 175 degrees Celsius, and our initial temperature was 25 degrees Celsius. So we subtracted the 2 to get 150 degrees Celsius. Okay, from this point now, what you're going to do is you're going to substitute all your givens. So this number goes here, the Q goes here, and then the temperature is going to go here. And it'll look like this. Okay, so once you do that, you're going to take this number and divide it by, and I would put, when you divide it by on the calculator, put 1086.75 divided by, and then put parentheses. So when you're typing it, put parentheses 15.75 times 150, close parentheses, and then press equal. And that'll actually avoid any problems with the calculation. Okay, and once we do that, it's going to be 0.46 joules over grams times degrees Celsius. And the units, again, since these don't have like units for where they cancel, we have to keep them. So all we do is we just rewrite them as joules on top of grams times the degrees Celsius. And that's actually all three of those are 1 unit expressed for specific heat. And that's how you do number 1 on your assignment. All right, so the next one I want to take a look at is number 7. And it's asking you how much heat in joules is given when 85 grams of lead cools from 200 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius. And then it gives you the specific heat of lead, which is 0.129 joules over grams times degrees Celsius. Okay, the reason I picked this one is because you're going to notice that now the final temperature is going to be smaller than the initial. So you're going to have a negative number, which is pretty much okay because the negative number is telling you here that it's losing energy. Okay, because we know that it's asking how much heat is given out. If you recall, you have these notes, and if they're asking you for heat or energy, we know that we're looking for Q. And that's again what I've told you before, and that's how you're going to figure out what it is that you're looking for and which of the formulas, manipulated formulas, you'll be using. Okay, so we know it's going to look like this. And we start with pointing out what are the givens. Okay, so it gives us 85 grams. And we know again, looking at our notes, that if it's giving us grams, that's going to be mass, and that stands for M. So you can go ahead and indicate that's giving us M. As you go forward, it tells you you have something in degrees Celsius. And again, looking at your notes, you look at what's in degrees Celsius, and you're going to find out that it is temperature. So we're going to go ahead and indicate that that's going to be our change in temperature. Again, where the 10 is going to be our final temperature, and the 200 is going to be our initial temperature. Okay, last but not least, they give us a specific heat, and it just tells us that's what it is, and that's CP. Okay, so I just rewrote everything. The heat is 0.129 joules over grams times degrees Celsius, which is given to you. And so all you have to do is now multiply all three given, 85 times negative 190 times 0.129. Once you do that, you're going to get a total of negative 2083.35. And remember that the unit is joules. And one of the reasons why the unit is going to be joules is because this gram is going to cancel with this gram right here. And then this Celsius is going to cancel with this Celsius right here, and then the only thing left over is joules. So here's what I want you to do for the remainder of the time other than finishing the assignment. I think it's going to be best if, like I said, you go back to your notes, and for each one, I want you to go ahead and either highlight or underline what it is that they're asking you to find, so you know which formula to use. And then on top of that, underline all the given numbers, and I want you to go ahead and label them. So if you look at 10 grams, don't guess it and say, I don't know what it is. You can simply look at your notes and say, okay, grams. All right, so that stands for M. So you know that you're going to label that M. The next one is something in degrees Celsius. All right, so you look at your notes, you know that's going to be your delta T. And then here you're given something in joules over grams times degrees Celsius. Not only does it tell you its specific heat, but it gives you a unit that you know is only for specific heat. So you know that's going to be CP. And so again, once you label it, and you know that's CP, you can go ahead and figure out the rest of them. So once again, go through the entire worksheet, label everything, and then you can go and finish it up, and it'll be a lot quicker. All right, thank you.